Okay, cool. Well, I'm really, really happy we've got such amazing guests tonight across the spectrum of writing, directing, acting, editing, composing, and you know, sometimes I feel like writing for film, editing for film, writing music for film, it's almost like a different languages, you know, and these languages kind of have different emphasis on different parts of film. And so it's very rare that we get people from different disciplines in a room together to talk. So I'm very, very thrilled, albeit very nervous. Because I'm not sure about, like, if you're composers or editors, but I spend a lot of time in a room by myself in front of a screen. So standing in front of people is just, it's a little fun.
Don't worry, Stephen.
All right, thanks. Yeah, what you gave me before is kicking in. Thank you. So I'm not sure where to start introducing our amazing panel, but I think we'll start with the person most likely to have a national holiday named after them. Ladies and gentlemen, Dame Miranda Harcourt. Next to her, Mr. Stuart McKenzie. Woohoo! Grayson Gilmour. Mr. Jennings. Gretchen Peterson. And Mr. Ben Powdrell in the end.
All right.
Is this okay without the microphone?
Use the mic.
Use the mic. All right. Okay, cool. Well, I think if it's okay with everyone, what I'd like to do to start off with is just ask you briefly to, well, really describe what you do. Miranda, could we start with you?
For sure, and I'm going to be very brief because we'll want to get to the meat of what we're doing. I'm an acting coach is my primary thing that I do at the moment. I work with actors and I use a lot of music and composition to as a provocation. I'm also a director.
Stuart.
Hi there, I'm a director and a writer, both in film and theatre. Yeah, that's all I've got to say on that one.
You're an also expert Instagrammer, by the way. I love your work. And Grayson.
Kia ora koutou. Yeah, I write a lot of music. I perform. I teach music. But this is a question I generally struggle with quite a bit because it's all encompassing. Yeah.
So teacher, educator.
Sure.
When I first met you, though, you were playing in a rock band. So
yes. Yep. Toured the world with a fun punk, post-punk kind of just noise band. Yep. And basically just got into film scoring as a natural evolution of that. But we can rattle on about that later. So I'll pass the mic.
Unfortunately, don't come from a rock star background, but yes. Yes, I'm a film editor and have a background in assisting as well. So I have a assistant editor background, but yes, film editor.
Hi, I edit mainly in drama and documentary, and yeah.
When I first met you, you were playing the trumpet in a ska band.
Yeah, I do that sometimes. Yeah, that's my hidden talent.
Kia ora koutou. My name's Ben. I'm an editor and a writer, and I'm working in film, TV, documentary, and and that's what I do.
And stand-up.
Not anymore. We all have to have our hidden talent, and that's really repressed and hidden now. Comedy, way repressed.
One thing I'm really interested in about who we've got here is...
That's still on, great. So one other thing I'm interested in, we have 3 picture editors here. And as directors and screenwriters, could you talk us through the process of writing the script, filming the script, translating that into a film through editing? Could you talk us through your process around?
Yeah, I mean, I'll try. The example I'll give is a film called For Good, which Miranda and I worked on and directed in 2003. It was a film commission, low-budget film. And the music process on that was really interesting for us because I had listened to Shane Carter's Dimmer. So I Believe You Are a Star had just come out at the time that I had started thinking about adapting our stage play, which is a verbatim play, into a feature film. And I became obsessed by the music in Shane's album. So I'd listened to that as I was writing the script, and it really kind of permeated the whole mood of the story. And we knew that we wanted to approach Shane to do the music for good, which we did, and he was really excited about doing it and did such a great job. We're really thrilled. But the kind of the concept around it was that we would use all his music. So he would compose the music for the film, and we would use tracks from I Believe You Are a Star. So we used about 3 or 4 of those tracks. The track that was kind of iconic in the film was Smoke. I don't know if you know that, but the kind of it just fed in, as I say, to the mood. So that was, music. I mean, this is a truism for anybody who's working in film and theatre, but music is so important for me. It feels like that's when the intensity of the story really connects. So it's really exciting when you're in the sound mix and you're putting together those tracks. That's when I feel that I really understand the characters and the context. So I don't want to kind of hog it, but I just, it was such a profound experience working with Shane to bring the music for that show together, and I felt that it really fed into the writing. So, Andrew Thomas, who's here in the audience tonight, is somebody that we've worked with consistently in theatre and film as well, and I'm sure Andrew will have some really interesting insights to share with us about that process. But once again, Andrew did the music for our film, The Changeover, which is a great score, and we worked very closely right from the beginning, as the script was being written, to kind of get a sense of the mood, and he would pass pieces towards me to help in the writing process.
That sounds like an incredible collaboration. And is it typical for you to start writing with music in mind? Is that?
I think it is. I mean, the project that I'm working on at the moment, which is based on Lloyd Jones's novel Here at the End of the World We Learn to Dance, is another film where the music is so central to the story. It's a little bit like Kieslowski's Blue, where the music is part of the thematic of the story. So already I'm thinking about the music, and there is tango in it. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And in the theatre that we've done, Miranda and I have done, we've always kind of thought a lot about the music. Like in a play that we did called True, Roy Montgomery from the Pin Group did the music, and I was very familiar with his music.
You
so
seem
really
to be gravitating towards like the flying nun end of the spectrum here. I'm all for it. Miranda, as an acting coach, is music a tool that you use often, or is it?
Yeah, totally. With any actor that I'm working with, from very famous actors to new actors who are just emerging, they'll always say, how can I begin my process of moving towards the character? And I will always say, you should develop a playlist, and with that playlist, you should share the playlist with the other actors and the director at the beginning of the rehearsal period, and then we'll all dance to all of that music, or the music will be played during an exercise that I do called Hug to Connect, which is a Buddhist meditation, a 2-minute hug, and in whatever relationship they may be, the divorcing parents, the estranged child, the lovers, the siblings, they might do, for example, this exercise, Hug to Connect, the 2-minute Buddhist hug, and they will gift each other a piece of music that they've chosen for their character during that exercise. So yeah, music is key to the evolution of character. Okay,
excellent. Well, these are great answers. Thank you very much. I'm going to head down to the other side here. So, yeah.
I'm just going to break in there with a comment, because you mentioned like playlisting leading into a project, which is something that I've noticed becoming a little bit more commonplace with like directors and editors. And I remember feeling a little bit of trepidation going into like, oh, I'm going to throw in my kind of my hot takes, my selects in the mix and see how they float. And
Spice Girls.
Always. But I found it was actually quite a cool tool to figure out what people's interpretations of what was happening in a script or in a show was. And you'd have like quite like, oh, well, you thought it was that, it's definitely this, sort of moments, and that you'd be like, oh, I thought this was great, but you think it's like too esoteric or too weird, and it's quite it's an interesting meeting ground. The playlist, I never really thought about it until I started finding it popping up quite like frequently with people that I was working with.
I love
and
this.
It's like this almost like this safe place just to test the water, to see what people are into.
Is it also
Yeah.
a safe place? And I have to ask everyone here, like, talking about music seems to be quite a hard thing to do. Or it seems to be perceived as a hard thing to do. I've lost count of the number of directors who've said, I don't really know much about music. I'm not really sure how to talk about it. I've always thought that there's no real correct way.
Well, yeah.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
if
sure,
you're in front
sure,
of an
sure.
orchestra, there's a correct way.
No.
But if you are talking with a director or someone who doesn't have a musical vocabulary, we're all humans, so hopefully we can relate to emotions. And maybe that's a better place to start. But I'm interested in terms of our editors here. Like so Greg, Gretchen, Ben. Could you each talk a little bit about your approach to using music in your edits, how you approach integrating it into like a trailer or a drama series or a film? Greg.
Yeah, for me, I think coming back to the playlist idea, that's been a very useful tool that I've used. Recently I've done a lot of short form stuff, sizzles and trailers, etc. And done a few pieces for the Film Commission where I sizzle together films that they've made over the last 12-month period, and we would always start with a playlist there, and basically one or two tracks really stand out as a starting point, and then you go down the path and I just listen to them before I cut anything, and then I pitch one will really stand out, and then I want to use this one, and then that's a starting point, and that's really it's really about shaping tone. And I think to what Grayson was speaking to, I know on a project we worked together recently, Mr. Corman, it had a list of songs, essentially a playlist that the director had put together, and you read the script, and if you were unsure, you could always turn to that. And like you spoke to, sometimes you'd have moments like, this is a quirky choice, but when you listen to it in the context of a certain, once he goes, that's for this episode, then the penny drops. So it can be a really, no matter what you're cutting, I mean, I don't want to speak for everyone, but no matter what you're cutting, it's a tonal starting point more than anything. And if the directors, if you're lucky, they've actually come to the table and thought about music. And
Joseph Gordon-Levitt, I'll just do shouting. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is very musically astute and has got a very deep musical knowledge. He would, I imagine, be a perfect collaborator.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was a tricky job for Grayson on that one, because he certainly had a very strong idea of what he wanted, and his musical knowledge, as you say, Miranda, is phenomenal. So, yeah, that was something that he naturally made a playlist because that's what made sense to him with that background. So I think, that would be my main input, I guess.
And I guess making a playlist is almost like a non-verbal way of communicating ideas about music, right? You don't have to sort of say, I want something that's in a major key in 6/8 and was recorded on tape in a small room in Dresden in 1832. Before the invention of tape. Yeah.
Exactly.
83, great, yeah. A good year in Dresden. Wolf. And just to be clear, when we're talking about playlists, are we all, is it with Spotify or Apple Music? Or when you say playlists, what are you...
For me, it's Spotify, but it doesn't matter.
Spotify?
I mean, I'm mainly because I use Spotify, but I'll get someone to send me that as a Spotify playlist. But it really doesn't matter. It can be files. That's not important, I don't think. But
okay,
yeah. Sometimes it's a YouTube playlist or just an actual folder in Dropbox with a bunch of MP4s. whatever flavour of the day, I guess.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Very
I'll
good.
let Gretchen answer.
And Gretchen, so you've cut like TV, you've cut film. Your approach to music must be, I mean, dependent on the project to a degree. But is there? How do you approach music generally? If I know it's
I
a
think
terrible
with
question.
editing, like there's a rhythm and pace with the edit regardless. So, with something like a drama, I would try and keep music away from it to begin with to try and get the narrative right. And then with documentary, I would try and use music to help me sometimes to crunch down sequences. But yeah, it just depends. Like I think it's always good to have a composer because temp music is always replaced. And so with She Shares, so Stephen composed the music for She Shares, a documentary I cut. And I put heaps of temp music in there. And I kind of jammed too much music. And then Steve got in there and I watched it and went, oh wow, where's my music? And then it was like, oh wow, look at the space. And it gave
That was
the
just me being
story.
really lazy.
I don't think so.
I was just like 90 minutes. No.
You gave it room to breathe, which is, like music with composing especially, like you can get too busy. So you just need to pull out the music. So
I'm interested in where you find your music from. Like if you're gonna, if you're cutting, say, like a drama, or if you're cutting, say, like a reality TV show.
I haven't cut many of them.
I know.
I'll take this one.
You can take it.
Working for Warner Brothers on some of the seminal pieces of reality television in the last 6 months, including F-Boy Island, was really a highlight of my career. When you're working on a reality television show that is hitting the front page news.
Segue, ladies.
Oh God, I can't believe I'm advertising that. But it's So talking about where I start with music, because sometimes I've used playlists when I'm writing, because then you can go for a walk and listen to the film that you're trying to write. And which is a really great way to get into the rhythm of pacing of certain scenes and things, but but then with Red, White and Brass, Noah had written different. Noah and Damon had written different tracks into the script, which is a trap that sometimes writers can get into because it's just like it's gotta be this track or I'm not doing the film. But then he was sharing a lot of, because there was a lot of songs that you will never find on Spotify in that film, because it's just there's a lot of Tongan music that hasn't had the airplay that it deserves, and so he was sharing with us a lot of YouTube clips of just some rough as guts music videos, but it's awesome tracks that really resonated with the audience. But bringing me back to reality television. A subject that I'm so passionate about. But yeah, so often you're serious. Oh my God. Okay, so you'll watch a scene and just go ugh, and then but you just immediately go to a bin of terrible production music, and you'll find the one that makes you want to throw up in your mouth the least, and then you'll lay that underneath and go, God, and then it actually works, and you're like, oh, gross. But and then you basically just cut pictures to make it, to get it over with as quickly as possible.
It's the glamour that you love.
You have not lost your stand-up.
Oh, Christ!
Still got it, mate.
Oh, you've been too kind.
This is actually an intervention, Ben.
Yeah,
and
thank you so much for coming along to my intervention.
We love you, man.
To get me out of reality television.
Filming it, by the way.
Yeah. Hi, Warner Brothers. Thanks for paying my mortgage. Love you guys.
Okay. So, Miranda and Stuart, when you were making the Changeover, I was wondering if you could both talk about the process of having finished filming all of the footage, going into the editing process, and could you describe how do I put this? Taking something like the Margaret Mahy story, which you'd adapted, which you'd shot, and then basically just sequencing the footage. I mean, is that a big mindset change for you? Like, did you know how the film was going to play before you got into the editing room, or were you making discoveries along the way?
I think we thought we knew how the film was going to play, and then we saw the assembly, and I was profoundly depressed, which I think people often are, directors often are, when the assembly happens.
Could we explain what is there anyone here who well, actually, can you explain an assembly to me as an editor?
It's essentially the first pass over the first pass of a film. It's long, it's baggy, and you really don't want anyone to see it.
Yeah, and it's in the order of the script
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
It's not just like Lego bricks all lined up.
Yeah. Exactly. So
Following the instructions.
yeah, you've read the instructions and you're trying. Usually the kind of most common starting point is to give the director everything that they think, everything that's in the script, in script order. So you know what I mean, some people when you get a bit further ahead and you're hired for that reason, you can say, I've lifted that scene right away. But it's more traditional to give the director everything, and you sit there and watch a big long assembly that's 4 hours long or 5 hours long, and then
there's no
it's your
music.
starting point.
Oh, there's no music.
Often it's naked or music, yeah, unless,
It's a disaster. Yeah.
depending on that is a disaster, yeah. I mean, there might be some temp. It could be temp, but
It could be worse if there is music. When I watched a 5.5 hour assembly that we put together, and there was music the entire way through, and we just wanted to kill ourselves. We couldn't get through the assembly. It's just like, get the music out of there.
Right.
Please, dear God.
Yeah, pull it out.
Yeah.
So Stuart, let's go back to you. You're sitting there, you're watching the assembly, you're in a funk of depression. What next?
Well, you know, in the process of writing the script and being in the editing suite and putting the film together, you know, we did have strong ideas of the kind of music that we wanted. Andrew, Miranda and I spent a lot of time swapping ideas around, and I'd like to come back to that whole thing about, you know, how to talk about music, because I think that's really the key thing when you're, as a director, working with a composer. But Andrew, who has an incredible broad knowledge of contemporary classical music and electronic music and pop music, was just a great person to collaborate with on that. And he had turned us on to Fever Ray. And there's a track...
Give that man a medal.
I know. So they are such a great musician. And there was a track, Morning, Keep the Streets Open, or Empty, which we kind of knew that for the crucial part of the film where Laura changes over and becomes a witch, that track would be meaningful there. So you know, we're kind of focusing the music around that.
And you knew this while you were shooting, before you were shooting?
No, I didn't know that while we were shooting, but that was something that Andrew had turned us on to, you know, as part of the discussions. Andrew, do you have anything to add to that and to that process?
I think with the process, what was great was, you guys as directors enabling, thank you, just being enabled to throw lots of ideas at you, lots of sketches, and being brave about trying many different kinds of styles out or types of music. I guess, you know, a lot of films, there are the constraints of the temp tracks and the director just saying, that's what it is, that's what it's got to do, that's the tempo, that's the rhythm, that's the mood. Just copy it, but you know, change the colour a little bit. And the great thing with you guys was that opportunity of I guess it was experimentation of it. Very brave thing to do, of course, the risk of it. But it was great. It was a great process. And yeah, being able to just share, again, like mixtapes ideas, like just sharing the knowledge of music, the different types of genres and ideas of it. And just even those sessions of just listening, talking about it, seeing where it fits, where it doesn't, was,
we felt that electronic music was something that would really bring the whole project together. And so I think that was a good decision to make early on, at least.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I love what you're saying about being brave.
Yeah.
That's something that I wish most filmmakers would be. It's easy to say, but
Andrew would give us a lot of different kind of components and stems to the music. So we did spend time just kind of stripping things out and purifying tracks and things as well, which is really useful having that versatility.
oh, that's cool. That's, so
I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Well, I mean, it sort of does, but I'm also curious just in terms of like music aside, just the editing process itself, because it's something I'm fascinated. The work that you three do fascinates me, and there's a lot of it that I don't understand, and I also the fact that as a director, as a script writer, that you have to, after shooting everything, after going through the script, sit down and figure out what sequences are going to play and how they're going to play and how the audience is essentially going to interpret your story. I find that fascinating.
Yeah, and obviously not all of that is to do with music. I mean, a lot
No,
of that is
no,
just
admittedly.
how to put the drama together. And we've got a great editor here with Annie, so she's probably better to speak to that than us. But it's just a rich and experimental process where you try different options. And in terms of the music element of it,
Can I just add to that? I think that when I work with emerging directors, which I do a lot at the moment around the world, as well as actors, I always begin with a kind of a little visit to Jungian psychology, which is opening yourself to collaboration and not being a closed, rigid asshole. About
I love this.
what is essentially a collaborative process, and what like I teach it at NYU Tisch, and I teach the National Film and Television School, and I teach emerging creatives, many of whom are directors, and what you're encountering is very frightened people. And so when they're frightened, they clamp down on the idea that they think they're making, and it's like, don't, Janet, don't give me some other kind of perspective. So it's like, let's just find a way to feel. Jung says you can never, the relationship with the other can never be any better than your relationship with yourself. So I say to young directors and young actors a lot, you need to be able to collaborate, feel really great about yourself in order that you can be open to the offers that are being made to you by the extremely talented, wise and marvelous person that you've hired to be your collaborator to make the project to be as good as it could be.
That's why you're the best, Miranda. That's awesome advice. No, seriously, you are one of the best communicators I've ever met. And I remember the very first time I ever had the privilege of working with you, and it was in theatre, so not a screen kind of orientated medium. But what you just said, you imparted to your students and you imparted to every single person on that team. And I wish I could say that I've had that experience on all projects, but I haven't. So what's a piece of advice for someone who doesn't have a Miranda Harcourt or doesn't have the 0800 Miranda Harcourt number? What would be one piece of advice you would give people in the room, people here?
I would say ask, don't tell. Is the really simple advice for anyone in a collaborative environment is like, I know what I want you to understand, but I'm just going to hold back on that. And instead I'm going to reformat what I thought I was going to tell you, I'm going to reformat it as a question in terms of, I'm going to take the risk of asking you to open up to me what you assume, what you think, or what your vision might be. Because there's always going to be time for the me person to speak out to you. Do you know what? It's what I call reverse the flow. And like I just spoke to an actor about this today. It's like reverse the flow. Stop thinking about what the story that you think that you have to tell the audience on behalf of the writer, because then you're just going to get shitty dialogue, blah, 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 blah. But if you reverse the flow and think about what the other person needs to hear from you in the scene, then it's going to be a much more interesting performance. So ask, don't tell would be what I would say to any creative.
That's a great piece of advice. Thank you. That's amazing. I've got a question, Gretchen. In terms of working with directors, when you have... Thank you, Miranda. So when you have... What's your first... Let me back up a bit here. So when you're on a job, you get hired as an editor. How many times have you been in the position where you start the job and you've never met the director? Does that happen?
Yeah, I lost. Yep.
So this is crazy to me because your first meeting is what, after you've done the assembly cut?
I mean, sometimes you meet maybe in a phone call.
Okay.
But depending on the project,
Mm-hmm.
like if it's a documentary, you might meet in the room together, yeah. But maybe a drama, they might pop in during the shoot, yeah. But quite often you don't meet them.
And how do you approach that? If you're meeting a director for the first time in the room, what's some advice you'd give if another editor was about to go into that same situation, they'd never been in that situation before? What are some pieces of advice you would say as an editor who's been through that to think about?
I think, I mean, the editor's role is, you're the first audience, so you're the first person seeing the footage. And I think, sometimes you're a counsellor. So your role in that room is to kind of gently guide them, I think. And sometimes they don't want guidance, and that's fine, but you're there to make something together. And in that room, my experience is you're in that room a long time. So you want to get on with your director. So, like I started off in news editing, and I learned very quickly, because it was fast turnaround cutting, I mean, very quickly that the reporters got stressed, you had an hour to get that to air. So if I'm feeling stressed, they're just out of control. So I learned to sort of work that. Sometimes I'll be fully stressed. Like sometimes it's not working, the edit's terrible. But you just have to go, it's all right, we'll just keep going. Yeah, just chip away at it, it's okay. I mean, sometimes it doesn't work.
Is that the time when you're like, well,
it's time for break.
I'll be right back.
Yeah.
I don't think she's coming back.
Yeah.
Ben, have you had a similar, in terms of like meeting a director for the first time in a room, what are some, especially in the reality TV world, do you even meet the director? I'm sorry, have I taken you back to a bad place?
No. I'm wallowing in it at the moment. A lot of the time it's just on chats. It's so gross that it's just like blip, and then like, hi, can you please wear blip, and that's so that's what you're trying to elicit a rapport with this person, but at the same time it's like once you hit like 6 blip blip blips back, like you'll get like, oh, so I know this person is vaguely like this, and their name is this. And like, fuck it, I'll just keep working.
And
But
they've sent me like snapshots of their cat or something like.
like judge a person by their GIF. Like, right, you're that kind of guy. Okay, cool, yeah. You think that's okay? Yeah, great. Okay, cool. But yeah, so yeah, there are a lot of times when you're. But then there are other amazing opportunities where you have someone who's who knows their craft a bit better and they'll actually, you'll meet them, you'll have had time to do your prep, so you'll actually know the script and work out what you love about the story that you're about to work on together, and then you'll have offers, and it's like because you want to be able to offer something to the story to make it the best it can possibly be, and so that's why I love the opportunity to be able to do some prep with a script before I start working with someone. But then just be really open. Like Stephen Gallagher, I've worked with this man for, I don't know, something like 15.
I take checks.
What's that?
I take checks.
And he's seriously
Do you
always
take
been
checks?
the most incredibly well-groomed man.
checks.
I mean, you wouldn't know it to look at him now, but he's always been the most incredibly well-groomed and just
150.
and so warm.
200.
And just like it was always such a gift to have Stephen come into the edit suite, and you'd be like, okay, good. And then because in terms of talking to a composer, because I'm not gifted like Gretchen over here, who's actually done a composition degree. So I just like, is it a song like this, or does it sound like this? And it's having someone, a composer who you can vaguely talk to and about music, and then trust in their ability to be able to make those same offers.
That's very nice of you, man. Seriously, thank you. That's really lovely. Speaking of great composers, Grayson, the first score I ever heard you do, you recorded at Inca with Mike Gibson. It was a remarkable score. I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about, from a composer's point of view, working with a director, finding the tone of that film. Do you remember? It's
the most fun you can have dying.
Most fun you can have dying.
Yep.
Yeah.
Back
Has
then
anyone
with,
seen that?
with
Okay, great.
Kirsten McCon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you Matt
Whelan?
Whelan, yeah. If you haven't seen the film,
Smoking Matt Whelan.
yeah. And buy the album.
On Bandcamp.
Yeah, on Bandcamp.
Yeah. Wow, that was quite a huge. The scope of the film that musically was huge, and it's funny. I'm going back to mixtape territory because the concept for that was a mixtape, and she brought me on, knowing that I did a lot of different styles of music, but had a kind of contemporary classical kind of training, but played in like a punk band and could span that entire kind of spectrum. And we took a film like, I guess, Trainspotting, the soundtrack for Trainspotting, and we're like, it's kind of have this kind of like exuberance to it, but also some really like heartbreaking kind of moments. And yeah, it was, for me at the time, I had a lot of energy and a lot of time to sink into the project, and I was like, I can do it all, man. Like,
You didn't have kids then?
no, yeah, and yeah, it was a great film to, in many ways, cut my teeth on.
I think you did an outstanding job. Because the
thanks.
scope of the score,
Yeah.
the scope of the story, was huge.
Yeah.
That was a really
I revisited it recently because I was sort of cutting a show reel, and I was like, I need to just judge this up again, and I was like, holy crap, there's some huge cues in this film that I've almost forgotten about. It basically starts with like just like the loudest wall of noise, and it's like Matt Whelan sitting in a doctor's office waiting to get his like diagnosis, and it's just like. And then it cuts when the curtain opens, and I was like, wow, I almost forgot about doing that completely. But yeah, it was, and in many ways, it's quite a lucky feature to land, because it made use of a lot of the energy and the skills that I had at that time. Yeah, and I learned a lot more about the craft afterwards. To be totally honest, yeah.
So, speaking about like
working with the director to find the tone. So this director sort of was like, okay, Grayson Gilmour, he's got the classical stuff nailed. He, I've seen his band. It's amazing. It's energetic. Did you, along the process of making that film, was it more kind of like a journey of discovery? Had you got the music all mapped out from start to finish before you sort of began the collaboration, or did the director Can you describe the working relationship?
My memory is a bit hazy with this one, but we were constantly just kind of bouncing ideas back and forth for a long time, even before they were shooting, because they went overseas to shoot and they actually shot to film, and they brought the reels back to sort of digitize. So that was quite a long process. Yeah. And we just had a lot of ideas kind of bouncing back and forth, and we landed on a motif that carried its way through the film. There's 2 or 3 main sort of motifs that are voiced in many different settings. Like in one case, it's like a heart-wrenching little, piano ballad, and the other one, it's like a fully blown-out punk cue, and the other one, it's almost like a club track, and it's like Michael's theme, like rolling through it, and we kind of like just crafted our ideas around that, and found that the tone was really multifaceted, but it had to have a continuity that it always came back to in a roundabout way. So yeah, it was finding what that was, that character, and letting it be expressed in many different tonal kind of variations, I guess. Yeah.
And I love what you're talking about continuity, because that's one of the powers that I believe music can sort of lend to film. If you think about something like a montage sequence where you have a series of jump cuts that, as an audience member, take you through different times, different contexts, different spaces. If you just watch that without music, sometimes it can be
quite jarring.
Yeah. Right? So, Greg, continuity-wise, so I know you've cut a lot of trailers. And trailers are essentially, a type of montage, right? So what's your approach to making, well, just basically putting a trailer or a montage or shot together? Like the stuff you did for the film commission, those trailers are fantastic. Can you talk us through how your process?
Yeah, I mean, for those, music is, like I alluded to earlier, music is really the starting point. We start with the playlists and get the tracks down, and it's almost as simple as getting familiar with the films and the footage and whatever the source you're cutting from. So whether that's watching an entire film and cutting a trailer, or watching one of the pieces I did was 45 films in 4 minutes or something. So you have to either watch them all or rewatch, or sometimes you're only given the trailer because that's signed off by the studio, so you don't have access to the whole film. So you've got to get to know the footage and really kind of extract what the themes of that film are in one shot or two shots, So musically, it's almost like closing your eyes and just listening. Does this feel right? This is like it sounds mystical, but it really is that kind of simple in my head. It's like, does it feel like, if I've done directors' show reels and I get them to choose the music as a real good starting point, and it's like, oh, okay, this tells me, or that I say, give me your top 3, and then I say it's easily this one because it's going to be much. This is, I might offer that in, but you can learn a lot from how they view their work. And it's kind of like, listen to this track, close your eyes and think of your career, think of your filmography that you're giving me as a starting point. Does it feel like this track?
Like,
and that's worked. They go, oh, that's a great approach. And if they're having trouble coming up with a piece of music. So, but back to your original question, I mean, I would do a music edit. I'd work backwards from the duration I think I want it to be, do a music bed that is to that duration and has peaks and troughs, and so you might take a 5-minute track and condense it to 1.5 minutes, but it has all the shape that song explores. And then once you can literally kind of, maybe you're closing your eyes and does this feel right, but then you just start cutting, and it kind of just takes care of itself from there. But if I didn't have music as a starting point in those films, you could in those jobs, you could easily get snowed under with the amount of films.
Well, I think it's remarkable because I look at trailers, especially when you're looking at trailers that are demonstrating, say, like Weta Effects that you're currently working for, right? So they work on a lot of different material, and your job is to somehow create a show reel that looks elegant, sourced from these different pieces of film. And I think you do a remarkable job, because there's a shape to it all. It's not just sort of random. It doesn't feel like just random pieces of cool looking footage. It feels like there's an arc to it. And I really think that's quite a skill set, sort of putting a type of narrative, or enforcing a type of narrative on sort of like quite different picture shots. Yeah,
that's essentially what it is me making my own story based on a bunch of ingredients which have no right in being together. And I mean, that is essentially it. And they have no tonal genre. You're pulling from every genre, every kind of film, and it's my story and the music, and often the music. I mean, my story is just inspired by the music often, but that's the glue that pushes these ingredients that have no right to being together and emulsifies them together. That really is it. It's yeah. So
I'd like to go around all of you, and thank you very much for the. It was a rather free-ranging conversation. What I'd like to do is go around each of you and ask a question, and William, can we throw questions open to the audience after that? So I'd like to go around and ask each of you if there was one thing a composer could do to help make your life easier. We can sit that one out. What would it be? Miranda, could we start with you?
Sure.
And this is in a film context.
In a film context. Oh, okay.
Oh.
Well, I kind of had already experienced that with Andrew, going back to Andrew, because when we did a play called Transmission earlier, about a year ago, which was a verbatim account of Jacinda Ardern, Grant Robertson and Michael Baker's sort of real-time journey towards shutting down New Zealand. And Stuart and I, as he was the writer, I was the director, co-director, we directed it together. And we brought Andrew into the room to respond in real time to the drama as it was happening. So it was kind of the perfect situation where he was feeding into the journey of how we were making the pictures and the rhythm of the piece. It was a true collaboration, and so I think that the best thing that you can ask for from a collaborator in that situation is that they are open to what you want to achieve. They're smart enough to fully understand the theatrical or the film-based, the narrative-based element that you're aiming towards. They're as much of a dramatist as you are yourself, but they have just this kind of wealth of oceanic knowledge as well. So that's, I feel like I've already experienced that. Thanks very much, Andrew.
But I loved Transmissions because not only your music sound was great, Andrew, but also you had like your stuff, but you also had the characters playing like Mr. David Kilgore.
Yeah.
And like, again, Flying Nun.
Yeah. What's that about?
What is it about? But I love that, the difference of hearing sort of music from the speakers, music from your performers. That was a really joyous, brilliant collaboration. I love what you're saying.
Yeah.
Stuart.
I'm just going to go back to the discussion that we had before about how to speak to composers, or for composers how to speak to directors. I think that politely. I think that music is such an emotive area, and you can often feel a lot of judgment. Yes. And so that's the important thing for me, is to find a relationship with a composer where you don't feel as though you're being judged. I mean, we all know what it's like at primary school or at secondary school when you're judged on your music taste. And I think that we carry a lot of that kind of fear with us as adults. So in finding a great relationship with a composer, it's about trust and experimentation and dropping judgment, because it's only when judgment is dropped that you can really be open to new material. So for me, that's and it's a real treat and privilege to have an ongoing relationship with a composer, because you understand a lot about. There's a lot of shorthand, obviously, and there's a lot of shared experience that really makes it a joyous occasion, a joyous collaboration.
That kind of secret shared language that you invariably kind of develop over the course of a project.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'd
like this piece to be a little more, velvety.
Yeah.
Brickwork.
Yeah. That's a really beautiful thing. It's a real privilege to have that kind of relationship with somebody. It's a deep friendship is developed with a composer or with an editor, because you're spending so much time and so much intimate time with that person. Yeah.
That's great. So we can, Great. Oh no, Grayson, you want the opposite. The opposite. Well, yeah.
Okay.
What, Grayson, what's
What's something that a director or editor could do to make your life or your job easier?
Yeah. We've sort of maybe discussed kind of working in isolation a little bit. You mentioned just spending a lot of time in a room by yourself. It's such a strangely siloed existence. I feel like composers need it. A lot of post-production folk, work in, and opening up that process and just collaborating in person with the other, party is such a huge and eye-opening part to the process. I want to thank Annie Collins for, just a general thanking of Annie, who had, I guess Mark and Louis for shopping on that feature, had invited me over to sit in on you editing the picture. And I guess it was a bit of a dark art for me at the time, and I was like, oh, this is a cool experience. I get to go in and sit on the edit. This is exciting. And we watched, I guess, the first assembly or a very early cut of it, and it would have been about 3 hours or so long. And I watched, you basically say, this isn't working, and we're going to completely rearrange this entire film and chop, 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 and like just rearrange the entire film after lunch. You know, like, and and it was an amazing process to watch. Like, I had a huge, I guess, you know, I understood a lot more, but I had a real profound kind of respect for the process after witnessing that. And again, it just, you know, you learn more about what other people are bringing into the project, and I think that's really valuable. And Louis and I, you know, still work together to this day as director and composer. We talk about those relationships and those funny vocabularies, and I was just thinking about how beautiful that is, really. Like, Louis had me come in and play some percussion on a project he was working on last year, and I was like, it really needs body percussion. I think I need you to take your shirt off and like go and slap your chest in the booth. And he went and did it. It hasn't come to fruition yet, but he did it, and I was just like, this is great. Like, there's be more situations where like there's a director-composer relationship that you can kind of like trust each other. And
so your ideal director will slap their chest.
Yeah. Louis trained as an actor.
Yes. He's got.
Let's thank.
Yeah. Yeah, credit due. Yeah, but I feel like having that kind of dialogue between our departments and just understanding it a lot better will be really fruitful. So yeah, just opening it up.
Thank you, Greg Jennings.
Yeah, I think on the back of what has been said earlier, Gretchen spoke about the kind of, what was the word you used? Like a guide with the director, and you kind of a counsellor. So I think of the edit suite as a safe space, and somewhere that the director can close the door and shut out the worries of the outside world and any angst they have about their project, and they turn to you for support, and never really phrase that way, but that is essentially the dynamic there. And so I often say you know, it's not just about pushing the buttons, right? It's about offering your opinion, and that's ultimately what you're hiring when you hire an editor and when you hire a composer, is my opinion. And how the art of it is how you express your opinion with it in gentle ways when you need to be gentle, and firm ways when you need to be firm, and really representing the film and the audience. And so what I'd ask for a composer is that you come into that room, and like I've worked with both of you guys, and you're fantastic at this, and so it's not a direct ask to the two of you, but to basically for a composers to be like yourselves, where you embrace that way of working as well, and respect that it's a safe space. We close the door, and it's a positive vibe where we're all working for the film, and we want the story to be as strong as it can be, and feeling confident that you can speak up and offer up your opinion. So I think just collaborative spirit. Ask, don't tell. I'm going to take that home with me. That's fantastic. So yeah, that's all I'd really ask for a composer, is just be like these two. Yeah.
Gretchen. Thank you, Greg.
Just more on that point, I think collaboration is the key. So I love it when I get stuff early, like, you know, I ask you for stuff, like, give me something. So any sort of stems or sketches or, Oh, I love getting stems. I mean, if you've got the time, but yeah. And I was working on something just a few months ago, and the composer gave us different tempos with tracks, and that was pretty cool. Like, just variations that you can play with. Yeah.
Could you, is there anyone there who needs stems sort of not explained, but basically elucidated upon? Everyone knows what stems are? Cool. I was hoping you'd tell me, man. I have no idea. So, I'm under the impression that stems are basically, if you think of like the piece of music as a whole, like as a component whole, and let's just say your piece of music has a Nigerian nose flute, a Prophet 5 synthesizer, a drum kit, and a cat in it, right? That's what makes up your track there. It's all mixed together. We play it in stereo. So what I'm giving you is I'm giving you separate stems because you want the Nigerian nose flute. Sometimes you want the cat, but not always. The Prophet 5, you're loving that. The drum kit, maybe. But I'm giving you these as separate entities. So you can play them together and it represents the whole mix. Or you can chop them and change them and move them around as you will to better suit your film or your dramatic context.
Yeah, I mean, quite often it's layering it up. So you can pull back. And, you know, obviously you give it back to the composer to fix up all of the dodgy edits that we... Yeah.
What dodgy edits do you mean?
Yeah, true.
Okay, cool. So providing you with stuff early.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Like that.
Totally agree with you there. I've actually just started doing it as a just a workflow thing. Like if I submit a mix or something to the edit, I'll just send the stems as well. Just bounce them out, even if they're not being asked for. It's amazing how much flexibility that offers the process, and then you'll get something back that is still your music, but sculpted in a way that editor wouldn't have been able to had you not given them then the stems. So yeah, it's now become totally just an embedded part of my process where it's like mix stems, have them all, do your worst, and it comes back, it's like missing a beat there, and I'm like, fuck, oh yeah, it's genius, yeah.
All right, Ben,
One thing a composer could do other than break you out of that reality TV room, what would it be?
Yeah, I'd agree. Definitely, because quite often with an assembly or with even getting towards a fine cut, we're trying to essentially sell the film again to the film commission or to whoever the stakeholders are. Like when it's to say, see, it's working, right? It's gonna be great, because they come in and quite often will be skeptical.
Is everyone from the film
created.
commission here, just out of curiosity?
Love you guys.
No,
and,
great.
But you're still trying to sell the film to distributors, and so you're trying to present something that has as much in there as possible. And so if the composer is coming in way too late down the production, even though Stephen is very gifted at this, because you'll just be like, it's done and it's locked, and then he'll add his pixie dust, and suddenly you're like, you finally hear the final composition, a year later, and you're like, oh my god, it's amazing. But you're quite often you have to, the editor is trying to create a score, and if it's going to be production library music, it's like, that's going to be a really hard sell quite often. And so if you can, and with a lot of composers here, and experienced composers with an incredible back catalogue, if you can just offer, without opening your entire back catalogue and just going have at it, but if you can make offers of, this is something that I created. This is just, I was just playing. Here's just offering some things that you've been working on, because at least then you know more of the style of the composer that you're working with, and that what they're capable of, and so you can start building. Obviously, yeah, definitely stems are really important, because you can again start playing with those. With those layers. Shout out to director Celestina, who I'm working with at the moment, who's, this is her first short film, but she's created this incredible, without, and I don't know, she's brought on the composers really early. William here, he's already submitted some work which we've got into the film commission, plus a composer because it's an 80s, it finishes with an 80s dance battle, and it's just like, fuck yes. It's
when can we see this?
My dream job. And so the fact that we've got this this dance battle music in there, and I'm cutting to the, I'm cutting to it, and it's just like it's if there's so much excitement in this film coming together without me just like ripping off, you know, Flashdance, and people going like, yeah, imagine the film but without Flashdance. You know, like it's still gonna be good. It's just not Flashdance. So it's commend you for what you've done. But and the last thing is just I guess just patience with us editor folk for when we have submitted something and done some horrendous 16 frame cross dissolve on your beautiful composition just because the studio said it needs more breathing space here, and we've just gone and it's just we've had to be really rough as guts with the composition. So just patience with that, and we know you're I just had a recent experience with Rian Sheehan, who's an absolute genius. But and I had to just be like, yeah, we had to make some cuts, and I could see it broke his heart because I was just like, yeah, I know, and he could hear it, and he was just like, you've kind of fucked it a wee bit, and I'm just like, I know. Well, no, you just like in this in the politest possible way, but just like really from you. And I was like, I'm so sorry. And he was able to, because you're so gifted, you can fix it. But it's just patience with when we've broken your work. Sorry, love you guys.
No. I think these are all great answers. I would, I guess one more.
I was just going to say on the back of that, remember that ultimately we're offline editors.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Composers bridge the gap and are offline and online. If you're lucky, you get them early enough that they can sit in the offline. But we're going to leave it how we're going to leave it and leave it to the professionals. The sound team comes through and replace all the effects we downloaded at 2 a.m. from YouTube. And the composer's going to come in and re-music edit and possibly rescore those 16-frame dissolves. So, please remember we're offline.
I think we're all part of the same team, right? We're
absolutely, we're all part of the same
reason.
team, but it's, I think it's good to point that out, the offline-online dynamic.
I absolutely agree. And one thing I would like to add to that is that, and it doesn't happen all the time, but when it happens, it's fantastic, is when editors turn up to the dub stage when you're mixing the film. I love that, because often being on the sound team as a music editor, our focus is, it's on the screen and it's on the sound, and sometimes we get a little, sometimes it's easy, I don't want to speak for, maybe it's just me actually, sometimes I just get a little bit, I lose focus about what the story is, and I'm concentrating on a more of a technical kind of element about the soundtrack. And why I like editors being there, why I've seen it again and again, that's just fantastic, is because you've been through the process of creating the story and creating what we're seeing on screen with the director, and you've got all of this knowledge and all of this insight into the story and into the backstory in some cases that we, because we're last in the chain, don't have. And so to have you there on the stage, for me, is a privilege. And because often it's the editors going, hey, yeah, great that you've dipped 80K by 3 dB, that's awesome, but the focus of this scene is actually the horse in the background, not the waterfall. I mean, all flippancy aside, it's like helping to refocus the team on stage. Thanks for your patience, everybody. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, sir.
Hello. Cool to hear that you guys are essentially music editors as well. I didn't really realize that. Are there things that you look for in tracks and with stems? What are the main ingredients that you love to work off? I mentioned pulse is something you love. What other kind of go-tos do you have, and what do you look for in tracks?
A good drone.
Yeah.
And whooshes. just right.
I'd say variation. Pulses help, but it just depends on what the context of what what we're asking for is, you know, if it's a genre thing, then, you know, you should stick to the genre, which, but, you know, like, personally, I've got quite a quirky taste, so I'm always into something that I go, wow, that's totally out there. So I think, you know, like, always offer up stuff. Don't hold back. Like, you don't know, sometimes the most unusual things can fit. So, yeah.
I just have to chip in with, it's funny you mentioned whooshes. I've just been kind of cracking up internally about the original take on production library music and how it's like the one that makes you want to vomit the least in your mouth. I don't have that much music of mine in production libraries, but I did do was commissioned by Red Bull Music to write a series of production cues for them, and I'm always floored as to where it ends up, and the most popular one that I always find editors going to is one where I just made this weird kind of like sound with my mouth, and I was like, it really needs like a so, and I just did it like between my teeth. I was like, and like it's everywhere. It's on like extreme snowboarding, skateboarding, BMX, burnouts, just like. I'm like, man, this. I'm getting 0.00018 like, you know, royalties a stream or something like that. So it's absolute like you know, pet food for royalties. But like, I mean, it's like it just cracks me up. I love seeing it end up in all sorts of places, and I think someone somewhere sat in the edit suite and made that choice, and it's you, man. It's you.
I wish you wouldn't use a pseudonym, because you never use a real name. It's always like you scroll down a page and it's like Lyle Love Beats or something. It's just like,
Hey,
use your real name.
you allow love beats?
Briggs, you have like a response to.
I guess a short response would be flexibility. So even if you don't give stems, the kind of easier sibling of stems would be duration. So even if it's a 3-minute scene and I've given you it at cut 15 as 3 minutes, if you give a version that's scored to it, great. But if you want to give a 5-minute version, and we have that flexibility, because as you rightly said, we by definition have to kind of be music editors too. So to have some additional flourishes because you've got a longer version, you might have had longer on the ending, and might want to use the 2.5 minutes of the 3-minute track, but the way you've ended slower really suits this next version I'm doing, and I've already got it because you delivered it to me. I can't use what you haven't delivered. So if you've got a couple versions, and in the spirit of collaboration, which is essentially what stems is. I mean, it's like, yeah, it's very trusting to just go, here's all my ingredients, you know, like here's my lasagna, like here's the beef and the onions and all the ingredients separated out. I mean, that is the definition of collaboration when we ask for that, really. Yeah. Steve's lasagna is probably killer too, but yeah. No?
Well, I mean, it needs some work, but I'm getting there.
Well, send me the stems of it and I'll tell you what's missing. Yeah.
On that note, I think for the composers in the room, like taking your ego out of that process and just, you know, giving editors creative control on how the music lands is actually a really awesome learning process for you, because you then figure out, oh man, it works totally differently and I hadn't anticipated that. And there's something really special about giving people that may or may not have musical experience or knowledge and just letting them guide the flow of your music. I welcome those like botched edits and weirdness. Sometimes it makes for some of the coolest music when you go back to it and kind of like just give it a little polish. Yeah.
That's a really good question. Does anyone else have any questions? Yes? I'll come to you.
Oh, you can, in case.
Quick question. What if there's like no actors, no script on the table? What's a good way for aspiring editors and composers to, I guess, collaborate and, I guess, practice and, you know, create things?
There's always an actor. Actors want to act. And I often say that to emerging directors. I go, look, don't feel like Celestina, I say that to you right now, don't feel like the actors are doing you a favour by being in your short film. They're desperate to be in your short film. They're desperate to collaborate with you. There's always somewhere that you can find an actor and some music that you can make something beautiful with, and then you can practice being a great editor, or you can practice being a great composer with that material, there's always a collaborator out there, and it doesn't have to be a paid collaborator, if that makes sense, because the actors will get something beautiful out of what you make together, and that will go on their show reel, and then bam, they get an awesome role in the blah, blah, blah. So there's a very positive outcome for the actor to collaborate with you, and there's always a drama school. You're from Christchurch, is that right? I'm living in Christchurch, but I'm from Chicago. Oh, right, okay. Well, in Chicago, easy to find a drama school to work with, and in Christchurch also easy. Come and talk to me, and I'll tell you all the great places to go to find actors in Christchurch, so that you can say, I just want you to walk around the room and stay in the sunlight every now and again while I shoot it on my phone, and then you make something beautiful. Does that make sense? Cool. But come and talk to me, and I'll tell you later on where to find all the actors.
So people have answers for the recording? In terms of like starting out editing?
Music videos.
Music videos?
I mean,
yeah.
Even just a song you like is unofficial. Yeah, an unofficial music video. I've cut unofficial music videos, just tracks that I loved and had a camera and shot something, or had no idea I was going to put the two together. I had a camera from I used to shoot a little bit, and we had a camera from a show I was working on that I just had for a few weeks, and it was a beautiful sunset. I went and shot my mate in slow motion, and then I was just listening to music, and then I cut it to music. This was when I was starting out, and it's just a way of practicing editing. If you wanted to practicing performance or directing, then shoot sound on that and dip the music down and have a little mini scene within the music video. There's no rules, but I think in a short answer would be a music video. It's tried and true option to just kind of play and meet people at a similar level to you that you're going to go on the journey with, and you'll have collaborators for life.
Totally. On that note, you mentioned earlier actors want to act, musicians want music videos. Because like in a really big way, my first music videos were cut by a guy who just wanted to do them, and he shot them and cut them, and he probably did 3 before we actually like landed funding for it. And then subsequently, like I've had a creative relationship with this director Jesse Taylor Smith, who's based over in Melbourne for like 15 years. I don't know, like ages. He's been going. He started making these music videos for me as a teenager, so yeah, just keen, yeah.
My question's around the stems topic we were discussing before, and how often you're, as editors, you're getting, and composers are getting the opportunity to provide you with raw material, because I guess often there's scenarios where often as a composer you're getting the pictures locked, but you're sort of describing a scenario where the pictures aren't locked, and I'm just interested in understanding the different types of scenarios.
Generally, it would be probably on a true crime documentary series, perhaps, or any documentary series that there's going to be a composer on board for quite a while, and then at that point, I mean, it's a wish list, so it doesn't happen all the time. But if you've got the opportunity to, then I always ask for it, because it can really help, So, yeah, it's not something that happens as much as I'd like. Do you?
Yeah. So were you asking like what stages of edit are delivered at different stages? How they work like that?
I guess I'm just more interested in that the opportunities for composers to provide stuff early, and that relationship, because that's familiar with that.
Yeah, definitely working towards. I guess the assembly is going to be too early, but it's when you're getting towards a first pass edit, well before it's locked, but you're getting to the stage where you're starting to want to show it to people. That's when you want to. So it's months from being locked, but it's coming together. That's when you want to get.
Actually, on that, and talking about
what Craig's saying, and at the risk of getting you inundated with unsolicited music files, if composers were to say, I don't know, put together a library for you, in advance, and just on the off chance that you might, I don't know, one day be cutting a reality TV show or a drama or you know, a trailer. What would be one way? I mean, what do you prefer? So if Craig's going to make you like a library, for example, do you want individual pieces categorized in a file system that makes sense for you by genre, by speed? What works? If the composer's going to give you a library of music, what works for you guys?
Because it will save a lot of our time scrolling through premium beats or one of these, you know, like, no offense, Grayson, I'm sure you've put some great tracks on there. But yeah, because it's just, you know, like, I mean, it's a good platform, don't get me wrong, but it's like, yeah, if you're actually knowing that you're going to be collaborating with this person, let's start talking about the music that we want to create. And but yeah, I mean, I'm looking at bins of production library music at the moment, and it's all, you know, so that you got your BPMs, but like tension, like keywords, it's tension, it's upbeat, it's a little bit cheeky, like those are the keywords that are in there, and you know, and so you're like, because the titles are all terrible.
Sure, but if there's some sort of practical way that, like, any kind of metadata where you like fast pulse or low ominous tone.
Yes. Instrumental with vocal, a male vocal that goes, ah.
Right,
Yeah.
but as much detail that makes sense, so it's easy for you to find.
Yep.
Okay. Gretchen, Greg, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd way prefer pulse. Pulse, drone, yeah. Maybe the instrumentation, yeah. I mean, it helps to have, say, tension, but sometimes tension is quite hard to read, like what's going to make something tense, I think. Yeah, so for me it's instrumentation and drone pulse, and yeah, the way you've supplied them.
Is that written like in the file name, or is that sort of in a text document at the top of the file? What's easier for you?
The file name where you get into the Avid so that you could search for it.
Okay,
I
cool.
think.
And as like 2448 interleaved stereo WAV files?
Something like that.
Okay. All right. Yeah, Greg? Sure. Okay. Just leave your email addresses at the desk and be prepared to be flooded. Yeah, all right. Yeah. Everyone? All right.
I would say, thanks. I would say there's, I mean, it's a fine balance. You definitely want as much info as possible to help you find it. And perhaps if you're lucky and you're on a big enough show, you have an assistant and they might be, you know, adding metadata and things in the Avid. But there is, if you are sending someone something and you're not formally on the show, I would not send too much, because there is a number in which it's you're just never gonna, if I get a folder that's too big and I can't actually listen to them all, then I might not listen to any, because you don't know if you're missing the gold. The last track might be gold. So really try and offer up your best stuff if it's just an unsolicited thing. And with the stems, I mean, just try and keep your session ready so that you can, you know, I wouldn't deliver someone's stems off the bat, but have it ready when they ask for it, unless you're already on the job, which is great that you do that as part of your default.
And
setup
let's take that to, if you were going to get music unsolicited delivered to you both, what would make sense for you? What would work for you? If say, you know, if someone was like, hey, I've got a great I don't know what, East Indochinian guitar dual band that I think you would be really great in your next film, how would someone approach you both?
Well, I mean, we're just keen to listen to as much music and get familiar with as many composers, especially in your own environment, as possible. So, you know, we're just all ears, so we're keen to listen to things. But I will tell you a story. When we did the proof of concept for the Changeover, we had been working with Shane Carter as the musician, because we thought Shane was going to do the music for the actual film as well. And we were working with him closely on, before we shot the proof of concept, and he delivered some really beautiful music. And we took that into the online, to the mix, and it didn't work, you know. It was a great piece of music, but it was very heavy and monumental. And we were really, Tim, is it Charpentier? Is that how you say it? Charpentier was the mixer, and we just couldn't get that music working. Emile de la Rey was in the mixing suite with us. He was a beautiful composer. And actually what he had done is he'd seen some of the footage from the edit, etc., and he had gone away and composed some music that he thought was his own personal response to the story that we were putting together. Anyway, in the mix, we were kind of pulling our hair out on that. We had 2 days for the mix, and at the end of the first day, we were going, this really isn't working. And Emile said, you know what? I've got something at home. Here's something that I made earlier that I think will work. And I went back to his place and listened to that and went, yeah, this is going to really work. And we brought it in. He worked on it overnight. Wow. So he worked full 12 hours, you know, based on the conversation that we had. Brought it in the next morning, and it went together like a dream. It was a really a remarkable experience to have somebody who was generous enough and open enough. He was trying some stuff out for himself, but it really worked for the piece and made a huge difference. Yeah, so it was a very memorable experience for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Miranda, what about you? Like, I mean, you use music for, you know, lots of different things for your coaching. So what's a way that somebody, you know, could approach you, send you music? What would make sense? What would help you?
Well, I really agree about not providing too much. Just a little taste. Like I'm getting 5 little elements would work better for that's the way that it would work for me in terms of time frame and that kind of thing. But yeah, you can be overwhelmed, exactly as you're saying. But often I will be, once again, I'll respond with a story like Stuart did. I'm like, oh, holy shit, I need something absolutely terrifying because I need the actors to be terrified and I need to change the vibe on set. I was on a very scary film last year in Australia with 4 teenagers, and we needed music to take them emotionally to a place very quickly. So we set up a really big speaker on the set in this forest. And then I rang up Stuart and said, what's the most terrifying piece of music that I can use? And he went, what about Penderecki's Threnody for Hiroshima? And which is because Stuart listens to like a huge amount of different kinds of stuff all the time. And so that's what we used. Was that your piece of music? Oh, okay. Well, that's what I used with these 4 teenagers in a pine forest in Adelaide. It was fucking terrifying. And
are they okay?
Yeah. I gotta check in. Yeah. But it was. Yeah, it is incredible.
Any opportunity to do it, jump on it. It's not.
Yeah.
God exists.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And really, like, to have a piece of music that can take people up immediately or take them down or just, like, provide them with an emotional vibe, provide actors with an emotional vibe, that's what I'm hungry to get.
So if someone was to give you a folder of music, so what you're saying is not too much stuff, and things that are like labeled like the most terrifying piece of music you've ever heard, or the most joyful music you've ever heard. Yeah. Oh, I love this. Okay. Are there any more questions? Did I miss some? Yes, sir.
What advice would you give for an aspiring film composer trying to break into the industry and land their first feature film?
Sure. Landing that gig, it's a really tricky one, really, because it's sometimes it's not even relative to the skills you may have acquired or the skills that you can bring to a project. It might just be that you know someone that thinks you'd be good without the other person really even knowing who you are. And I would just say persistence and kind of like maintaining that confidence that it's going to happen at some point. Because for a long time it will probably feel like the doors won't open, they won't budge. But when I was talking about Jesse earlier, the editor who kind of shot and made music videos for me, back, out of his own pocket, a lot of that kind of graft will eventually, pay off in the long run, because collectively there are people just doing what they want to do for the love of it. And they will land jobs that pay. and they will need to pay people to do jobs that they want them to do. And so it's just almost like a coming of age thing that those situations will play out. I think a lot of composers perhaps get a bit disillusioned with that process and like move on to other things or just quit music, full stop. But yeah, just having that kind of like passion to persevere with it is, you know, it's kind of simple, but it's weighty advice, really. Yeah.
I mean, I would agree with everything Grayson said. I would add one further thing to that, which was that in 2023, there's never been a time where there has been as much media created as there is now. And invariably, media will require some form of original music at some point. Also, like, focusing on feature films is one thing, but if you have a look at the streaming networks now, the longer arcing TV series, that's where a lot of really interesting things are happening. But everything Grayson said, 100%, just keep doing it. And I mean, echoing what you were saying about editing, you know, starting a music video, putting things out on YouTube, just if someone needs a music composer, how are they going to find you? I mean, put stuff out. Doesn't matter. Put stuff out. Talk to people find filmmakers who want to make films because they're out there, or who want to make YouTube videos, or who want to make TV series, who want to make things. And meet these people, because people need you. There's someone out there who's like, I need someone. I just wish I could find. Make it easier for them to find you, if that makes any sense. I've been told we have to wrap it up, but are there any final questions that we can? Yeah, come on over.
When it comes to writing, songwriting, composing, or script writing, is there ever a fear of not being original enough? And how do you overcome that fear, or do you have any strategies for it?
That's a great question. There's a really great little book called How to Steal, and just Google it, it's because it's everywhere, but it's called How to Steal, and it's really a book about how nothing is original. It's just how you, from the uniqueness, the uniqueness of you, how you put together the ingredients is going to make something which is unique. You can't avoid being unique because you're you. Do you know what I mean? So find that book, because reading that little book will really help you deal to the answer to your question. It's called How to Steal.
Don't pay for it.
It's by Austin. It's by Austin Kleon, spelled Kleon. Austin Kleon.
Does anyone else have a response to that? I think at some point it's something that we struggle with.
Sure. And I think actually having a wide scope of what you're listening to as a composer or a musician, so that you understand what it is that is going to make whatever you do unique, can be really beneficial and can get you out of situations where you're like, I know that this piece of music exists already, you know, and I have to kind of like reinterpret this and morph it into something that is actually mine and that I'm not going to get sued for creating, you know, like I've definitely like. You hear chord progressions, and you're like, you know, that's been done, and I'm sure, like, if someone was thirsty enough to file a lawsuit, they could probably like get some crooked musicologist to prove that, you'd kind of like copied them by, consciously or not, you know. So I feel like just listening to a lot of different music and being aware of how it's made is also really beneficial to seeking out what it is that is going to make your music unique.
Sorry, I'll be lacking in my role as Director and Editor Guild board member if I didn't plug all you. You obviously come along to a guild event tonight, and I'd encourage you to jump on your guild, because we're about to go through the SEWA, the Screen Industry Workers Act. So that's going to change the game in terms of us being able to collectively bargain for our working conditions and rights and rates of pay. So it's definitely going to change the game for editors, directors, and screen composers. So I'd encourage you to all jump on the guild and go to the hui. We're organising a whole bunch of hui to hear from everybody and to find out what you guys want, what we all want in terms of working conditions and rates and things. So encourage you to do that. Cheers.
Ben, is there a website you can point people to?
Well, you guys have your own website, but the DEGANZ for editors out there, it's the DEGANZ website, deganz.co.nz. I'm pretty sure that's right. Yeah. And also, if you look up SIWA, SIWA, they'll tell you all about the Screen Industry Workers Act and how that's going to change the game.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank every one of our guests tonight: Miranda Harcourt, Stuart McKenzie, Grayson Gilmour, Jennings, Gretchen Peterson, Ben Powdrell. Thank you so much indeed for coming on here, talking to us. Thank you to William Phillipson for putting this together. Have a good night. Let's have some drinks and peace out. Paul Marier.
Thank you to you, Stephen.